Second round of the playoffs is upon us, and I am seeing some very interesting matchups. Gotta love playoff football.
The Hunter.sheppard podcast. Covering the OK Prep scene since 2018.
What is going on, my fellow listeners? You've tuned into another episode of the podcast. Added a new intro song. Hadn't had one in a while. But, as I said, second round of the playoffs is upon us. And today we're going to break down some pretty interesting matchups. So, the Daily Oklahoman put out their top matchups the other day. And it's a pretty interesting list, to say the least. We'll start off with that. So, their top matchups, they have got Guthrie at McAllister, Wagner at Tuttle, Chandler at Marlowe, Cassia Hall at Victory Christian, Jones at Washington, and Hooker at Cashion. Now, that Guthrie-McAllister matchup really intrigues me, because I'll tell you right now, I think that game is going to be, the run game is going to be the highlights of that game. Because they note it'll be a matchup of stellar running backs with Isaiah Hammonds for Guthrie and Eric McCarty for McAllister. From what I have seen on both teams, like I said before, I think you're going to see the run game on full display in that game. I believe that game is at McAllister. Yes, it is. So, I would expect to see a run-heavy game in this one. Wagner and Tuttle. I'll tell you right now, I think both teams are capable of winning it. Tuttle is one of the favorites, but I think the defense is going to be on full display in this one. But both teams are capable of scoring, but as many of us said, and as they say on the Oklahoman, I think this is going to be a very heavy defensive matchup. And if I remember right, these two met up in the playoffs last year, and I believe Wagner won that one like 21-14. We'll see how this one goes. This is going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Then we got Chandler and Marlowe. You know, last year Chandler almost pulled the upset but fell 35-32. Now, two key matchups I do see in this one would be Casman Hill, the Chandler running back, and then the quarterback for Marlowe, Jace Gilbert, or as I refer to him as the Swiss Army knife, because he is their quarterback, he's their kicker, he's their punter. He plays defense too, but I'm not sure what position he plays. So he's literally a do-it-all guy. I'm not sure what his longest career field goal is, but I see on Twitter his longest one was that I know of was 52 yards. And I think I seen him post a video on Twitter where he hit a 65-yarder in practice. So, I'm going to be honest, I think a field goal could be the difference here. Because it always helps when you have a good kicker. But like I said, with Chandler, I know a key for them is going to be stopping the run game. So, I will definitely be keeping an eye on that one. Cassia Hall of Victory Christian is an interesting one to say the least, because if I remember right, these two played each other earlier in the year with Cassia Hall taking the victory. No pun intended there, but you get what I mean. So, these two meet up in a rematch, and I think this one's got the potential to be a shootout. VC's quarterback is playing pretty good right now. I forget his name, but like I said, the kid is playing really good right now. Okay, I see it was by 15 in week 0, so usually anytime you get a rematch from regular season, it is going to be an interesting one. Because I've seen a lot of blowouts in regular season, but then the second time those two meet in the playoffs, it's usually a close game. For example, a few years ago, well, this is when they was 8-man, but a few years ago, Burns-Flatdale City and Shattuck played in the regular season. I believe Shattuck wins that game like 46-16 the first time around, but the second time it was like 34-26. This is what I say. Playoff football really gets interesting because you're usually going to have a lot of you usually have the team that gets beat. They are wanting another shot at that team. I have seen it many times before. Now, here's one I think will be really interesting right here. Jones at Washington. Of course, the Longhorns got off to a hot start, and I believe it was the game against Crossings Christian. They had several offensive linemen out, if I remember right. That's what I remember reading, but I tell you, this game could be a shootout like it was last year, although I don't know if you'd call 26-22 a shootout, but Jones has a gunslinger at quarterback in Carson May, who's an Iowa commit, and like they were saying on the Squirrel Pick'em show, I think he's going to be the difference maker for the Longhorns. And Washington has been having a great season this year. I don't have stat lines for the Warriors, but just by looking at their schedule, they have been rolling and firing on all cylinders. And this is a rematch from last year, because I remember Washington won at 26-22, if I remember it right. And they are the favorite to win it all in 2A. They got runner-up last year, brought most everything back, so the Longhorns are looking to pull off the upset. Washington's the favorite. This is going to be an interesting game, to say the least. I can tell you that right now. Now, and then we get to the last one the Oklahoman has on here, which is Hooker at Cashion. I'll tell you right now, this one's going to be a battle of gunslingers at quarterback, because for Hooker, you got Gavin Parker, who I believe has thrown touchdowns to like 5 different targets. And then you got Ben Harmon, who, I tell you right now, he can throw it deep, but he can also run. And I've seen flashes of his ability this year. So, I'll tell you right now, I think this one's got the potential to be a shootout. Especially because, like I said, you got 2 gunslingers at quarterback. But we will see how this one will go. If I remember, these two met up last year, because it was like 60-22, if I remember right. Okay, yeah, it was. I was covering that game, actually. So, I have listed a couple games to watch as well. So, we'll start off with Class C. So, Class C, I see Midway at Tyrone. And that game is an interesting one, to say the least, because if you remember last year, these two teams got into a high-scoring shootout, 78-68. I'm going to admit, I know 8-man games are high-scoring. I don't think I've seen one that high-scoring in quite some time. Well, now that was Graham Dustin Bowlegs 114-64 a few years ago, but that wasn't a playoff game. That was regular season. So, as far as the matchups in that game, I think the quarterback matchup is going to be an interesting one again, because like I said, Tyrone, they got Kobe Williams at quarterback, and then that Midway has Jarrell Washington, and both of those guys are true dual-threat quarterbacks. If I remember earlier in the year during the preseason, I'd seen a stat line where last season Williams threw for more than 1,300 yards and 27 touchdowns, whereas Jarrell Washington, he threw for more than 2,500 yards, 31 touchdowns, and rushed for 750 yards and 10 touchdowns. And then as far as like receivers in the passing game, I think I'd say targets to watch would probably be Roberto Hernandez for the Bobcats, who had 17 passes for 5 touchdowns. Actually, okay, yeah. And then for Midway, they have Cole Miller, who had 750 yards for 15 touchdowns. This is last year's stat line. I'm not really sure what this year's is, but if it's anything like last year, you can probably guess this game is going to be a shootout once again. And then I guess really about the only matchup in Class C I had. I mean, I still think I know my 3 picks for Class C was Tyrone, Mountain View, and Timberlake. And let's see if I remember right. The other, I believe Mountain View has Wesleyan Christian, and who did Timberlake have? I think they had Boise City, I think. I'll have to look at the bracket. But getting to Class B, Class B will start with Garber and Dewar. And this game, I think, has the potential to be a shootout. Yeah, there's guys on the board saying Dewar by 2 touchdowns, but I think it's going to be probably a high-scoring affair. Now, Garber might be pretty young, but they have held their own this year, and they held their own against a pretty good Pioneer Pleasantville squad. If I can pull up my notes here real quick. So, I know for Garber, they have their running back in Tadante Chester. I'm not sure what his stat line is this year, but if I had to guess, he's probably got close to 1,000 or over 1,000 rushing yards, because he is one of those guys that once he gets going, you can't bring him down. And then their receiver core in David Nagel and Sean Martin and Carson Skuvinac has been pretty solid. And the thing with Carson Skuvinac, he's a tight end, but he can also be used as a fullback, because I've seen them use him in the running game as a fullback. And then the offensive line. The offensive line is young, but it might be one of the best young offensive lines I've seen, because not only do you have Colby Skaggs as a veteran offensive lineman, you also got 2 freshmen in Cooper Hughes and Jackson Weibling on the center and right guard positions. And I'll tell you right now, those 2 may be freshmen, but they are good. They are pretty good. And I know a good offensive lineman when I see one. And then their quarterback, Brett Howry, kid has been electric this year. Again, not sure on the stat line, but I know he's thrown for quite a bit of touchdowns, and he's ran for quite a few yards, so he's a pretty good dual-threat quarterback. And like Hughes and Weibling, he's also a freshman as well, but he's held his own out there. And then I think the unsung hero for the Wolverines would probably be Mark Bishop. He's also a freshman, but here's an interesting stat line. In 13 games in junior high, he rushed for over 3,000 yards. And I'll tell you right now, he has some speed on him. He has got some speed. Because I've went back and watched quite a bit of Garber's games. And then their defense has been pretty good too. I know they got if I remember right, I know they got Skuvenak on the pass rush, and then they also got Tadante Chester and David Nagel. So that's why I say I think Garber is going to be very interesting to see. And then as for Dewar, let me scroll back here. And then as for Dewar, of course, they got quarterback Jamison Ross, who, similar to Brett Howery from Garber, he's got a really good arm, and he can run. And I know I was out of town when Dewar came here, but I watched the film, and I've actually watched Dewar on a couple different occasions on film. And their wide receiver core is also one that is not to be underestimated either, because I know they got Thomas Brownfield, and he is probably one of their best wide receivers. In fact, from what I've seen too, that is probably one of Jamison Ross's best targets. And he's like 6'3", 6'4". He's out there pulling a Randy Moss, just like catching it and then just running, and just like nobody can keep up with him. And they've also ran a few running plays with him, but like I said, stud wide receiver. And then Marshall Bean is their other wide receiver, and I believe that is the coach's son. Like Brownfield, he's also got some speed on him. And then Kaleem Carter at running back. He's another speedster. And I know their offensive line, I tell you right now, their offensive line, similar to Garber, one of the toughest ones I've ever seen. I don't quite remember names of who's who on the O-line, but I'll tell you right now, between Garber and Dewar, I could also see there being a good battle in the trenches on that one, because you'll have pretty physical offensive line going up against a pretty stout and physical defensive line. Oh, it'll be interesting to see how that game goes. Although I think it's going to be a shootout, because like I said, you got two quarterbacks who can sling it and run, followed by a really good run game and wide receiver core. I would not be surprised if this game was similar to Tyrone and Midway last year, and like I said, that game was like 78-68. So talk about a shootout there. I'd say my next Class B game to watch would probably be Shattuck at Velma Alma. Now, this is one of these weird years. I was surprised to see Shattuck finish third, but if you've seen how tough B1 is, that district was a gauntlet. Because, I know Laverne won it, and if I remember right, Balco Forgan, they took Laverne into overtime. They gave Laverne all they wanted. But, getting back to Velma Alma Shattuck, so I would say Velma Alma's quarterback, I'll tell you right now, he might be the one QB nobody is talking about right now, Tristan Wainscott. I'm not sure what his stat line is this year, but last year over 1,000 yards rushing and passing. So, definitely a true dual threat QB, and from what I was told by all my Velma Alma people, and from what I've seen on film, this kid's very underrated, but from what I've seen, he's a stud. It's nobody's talked about him, but I'll tell you right now, from what little I've seen, he can throw, and when you're least expecting it, he's going to run downfield and probably get about 20 or 30 yards. Then he's got two big targets in Jackson Henson and Crew Garnett on the wide receiver core. And he's got a pretty good run game as well with Colby Kilcrease and Lane Jones. So, that's why I say, a thing to watch with this Velma Alma squad, they are fast and physical. And as far as Shattuck goes, we know the tradition with Shattuck is there. I know Shattuck has battled some injuries early on, but I think they are fully healthy now. Of course, they got their quarterback in Caden Laverty. I've seen a little bit on him, and I don't really have a stat line, but they also have a pretty good running back in Tyrese Gibson, and then two good wide receivers in Ross Latta and Jalen Cummings. Again, I don't have stat lines, but if you know anything about Shattuck, you know the tradition is there, and I'll tell you right now, I think the game will be, it's going to be I think as good as Velma Alma and Shattuck's offensive lines and defensive lines are, similar to Durer and Garber, I think you could see a very interesting battle in the trenches. That's just the kind of game I think we will see here. And then this next one I think will be another interesting one. I got Sealing and Caddo. Interesting fact about Sealing. They was the 4 seed coming out of B1. And if I remember last week, they upset top-seeded Ringling out of B2. So if this tells you anything about District 1 in Class B, that district is no fluke. That is hands down probably the toughest district in the state. Now, as far as Sealing goes, I was told their quarterback in Caden Manuel has had a pretty good season, and he's got a good receiving core in Jarrett Topfest, Coy Louthan, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and Hudson Hamer. And I'm told the offensive line is a little young, but is pretty tough. So, like I said, 4 seed coming out of B1, and they upset the top seed out of the other districts. So it's gonna be an interesting game. And as for Caddo, I know Caddo has been another team that's been kind of underrated all year, similar to Velma Alma, but if I remember right, they have a good dual threat quarterback in Colton Spears. Again, I don't have the stats for this year, but he can run and he can throw. And then if I remember, his brother and Hunter Spears is the running back. So you have 2 brothers that are legit and they can both run, and the other can throw really well. So, and I honestly could see Caddo running a lot of the read option they usually do, because they kind of run that pistol read option offense. I'll tell you right now, that game could definitely be a shootout, because you got the 2 brothers from Caddo. That is probably one of the best quarterback, running back duos in the state in Class B. And then Ceiling, of course, coming out of the toughest district as the 4 seed, coming off a big upset victory. And yeah, that's going to be an interesting game. And I think winner of that game is going to be equipped to make a deep run. Actually, I need to pull up the bracket real quick, because I don't remember who the winner of that game will face. Oh, actually, this is going to set up an interesting one, because the winner of Dewar and Garber will face the winner of Ceiling and Caddo. So, that would be an interesting matchup, the winner of those 2 games. See, another interesting one I think will get the attention of most would be Kyoga at Davenport. Well, Davenport came off that really good win against Regent Prep on week 10, and like I predicted, that was going to predict the outcome of the district. But I think, I tell you right now, the wide receiver tight end tandem of Casey Harrelson and Colton Van Fossen, that is definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with. And did I also mention Harrelson's like 6'7"? Yeah, when you got tight ends that are that big and fast, you know you're going to be equipped to make a... You're going to be equipped to have some speed and make a deep run. And if you've known anything about Davenport the last few years, they are a team that is always known for their speedy wide receivers. As for Kyoga, I know Kyoga's been a team kind of flying under the radar this year, but of course, they have their dual threat quarterback in Jance Welch. Played running back his freshman and sophomore years before switching to a quarterback. And they got probably one of the most slept on offensive lines in the state, and they have a pretty good running back in David Davis. He's only a sophomore, and I don't have the stat for this year, but looking at the stat from last year, over 1,200 yards. So I am willing to bet this year he's either right near that or he's close to it. And I know Kyoga's more of a run-heavy team, but they've shown their strengths in the passing game. Now getting to a couple games in Class A. Okay, if I can find what I was looking for here. So, first game on the docket would be Woodland at Gore. I know one reason I think this is going to be a game to watch. I know Gore and Woodland met up last year, and I can tell you right now, I think Gore is definitely wanting another shot at Woodland. Fell to them last year 40-16, but I'm telling you, Pirates are going to be a force to be reckoned with this year. I've had the chance to cover them several different times. Their quarterback running back tandem duo in Zane Craighead and Gunnar Dozier. I'll tell you right now, when those two get it going in the run game, those two are tough to bring down. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Once those two turn on the Jets, good luck trying to catch them, because those two are probably two of the fastest players I've ever seen. I actually kind of want to know what their 40 times are. I'm willing to bet those two could run a good 40 as quick as they are. And then their defense might be one of the most underrated and slept on in the state, because one game I seen, the defense, I lost track of how many 3-and-outs they held the opposing offense to. But I'll tell you right now, that pass rush is good at stopping the run, and I'll tell you right now, that secondary is fast, because there was a couple games I covered in which they almost had a pick six. And then I think, now I know I don't quite remember the names of everyone on defense, but I tell you, Dane Perriman might be a name nobody has ever talked about, and I tell you right now, he may be small, but that dude can tackle. He's probably one of the fastest linebackers I've ever seen. Well, and while he's not used on offense a whole lot, I'll put him in at fullback and goal line situations, and he's one of those you can hand off to on the goal line, and he'll just drag people with him. You know, similar to what you would do with Marshawn Lynch on the goal line. Once you hand the ball off, he'll just be dragging dudes with him into the end zone. But yeah, well, getting on to my other games, I know, I just talked about Hooker and Cassia, and I had them on the list. I said, and then the Oklahoman had that game on their games to watch, so that one's going to be an interesting one to watch as well. Defer back to my earlier segment on the Hooker-Cashin game. So, getting to the next game, which is Tonkawa at Fairview. And that one, I believe, is the Squirtle game of the week. I'll tell you right now, that game, I think, will probably... It's either going to be a shootout or it's going to be a heavily contested defensive battle. From what I've seen on Tonkawa, you know, they got that running back from Ponca City. That dude might be one of the best running backs I have ever seen. And I think he's only played like 4 or 5 games because he had to sit out part of the season, but He has been a key factor for this Tonkawa team this year. And as for Fairview, I remember Hooker gave them all they wanted when they played each other on the Week 10 Squirrel Game of the Week. And from what I've seen on Fairview, they've got weapons all around in the run game, in the passing game. If I remember, I think I had heard that the quarterback was the coach's son, or at least that's what I heard on the Squirrel Pick'em show the other night. And tell you right now, I think that game, like I said, it's either going to be a shootout or it's going to be a tightly contested defensive battle. It will be interesting to see how the Tonkawa running back will play. I don't remember a stat line, but I'm sure my guy Ben Welch could probably get me a stat line on that one. He's the play-by-play for Tonkawa. So, and then my next pick would probably have to be Burns Flat Dill City at Elmore City. And one reason I say this game's going to be interesting, Burns Flat, they were a 4 seed coming out of District 1. And they upset top-seeded Mangum in the first round. And that makes twice they've beat Mangum. Because they beat them like 56-38 the first time. I think it was like 50-34 the second time. Wait. Sounds about right. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but I haven't seen much on Burns Flat, but I've been told they are really physical up front and on defense. And they did hang with Hooker in district play, and that's where I think they started to put some people on notice, where they only lost to Hooker by 1. So I think they put teams on notice after that game. So as for Elmore City, if I remember, I know they got a wide receiver that's pretty good. I don't remember his name, but I believe he was a Wynnewood transfer, and he's already got D1 offers. I think some keys for the game for that one, I say they're going to have to throw to him a little more. I know someone said in the Ringling game they can hardly throw to him, but again, I'm not really sure on that, because that's what a guy from Wynnewood was trying to say, and I don't know. Sometimes he kind of exaggerated some of the details, but I don't know. I'm sure one of my Elmore guys could probably give me the lowdown on that one, but I definitely think a key to the game for Elmore is going to be getting it to their top wide receiver. I think it was, like I said, I don't remember his name, but his last name was Patterson. That's all I remember. And of course, as I said, Burns Flat, probably one of the most physical teams I've seen. I've seen a little bit on them, not much, but what little I did see, like I said, very physical up front. Of course, then getting to Class 2A, I already talked about Chandler and Marlowe and Jones at Washington, but I think Eufaula and Metro Christian, that game actually kind of has... That game's going to kind of have upset potential on it if you're a Metro fan, but I think Eufaula could probably pull it off with their offense. As far as how I think the game goes, I think it is probably a shootout. Because both teams have a good receiver core. Both teams have a strong-armed quarterback. I haven't really seen the defenses for either teams, but I have seen a little bit on the offenses, and I think it's going to be a shootout. Because like I said, you got two quarterbacks that can throw it really well, and a really good wide receiver core on both sides. Class 3A, I got two games I think will be very close to watch. Verdigris at Plainview, and then Berry Hill at Heritage Hall. Of course, Verdigris kind of put themselves on the map when they upset Holland Hall in regular season. And Verdigris, I think, officially threw their hat into the title conversation when they beat Holland Hall. But I think this game's got potential to be a shootout. Plainview's got multiple D1 quality athletes. Verdigris, like I said, always pretty good. A scary team in the playoffs. I haven't quite seen much on the two, but I'm kind of going off what I've heard. Berry Hill at Heritage Hall. I know Berry Hill's been kind of a team that's been kind of in the dark horse talks the whole year. I haven't really seen much on them. I do know they had got some transfers from Webster after Webster shut down their football team this year because they didn't have enough to play. I think Heritage Hall, we all know their wide receiver game. Because, they got Texas Tech commit Gavin Freeman, and tell you right now, that kid's like a young Wes Welker. And, of course, Wes Welker, as you know, is a Heritage Hall alumni. I've got this game being a close game, but I have to give Heritage Hall the edge. I mean, when you got someone like Gavin Freeman, you know they're going to go to him a lot. But I still think Berry Hill is going to keep it a close one. Now, we get to Class 4A. I talked about Wagner and Tuttle in the previous one. But I think Elk City at Grove and then Clinton at Bristow are going to be a couple pretty good matchups as well. As far as Elk City and Grove, that game, I know for a fact, that I think the run game is going to be on full display in that one. See if I can. Sorry, I'm just trying to look at my notes here. So sorry if I go quiet there. Can't remember the running back's name for Elk City, but I know Grove has Emmanuel Crawford, and he's one of the top running backs in the state. And also, if you don't know Emmanuel Crawford's story, I would highly recommend going and looking at the article Cam Jordan put out on the Daily Oklahoman. It's actually quite an interesting read. And just the story is just... Trust me, you'll want to go read the article. But getting back to that game, I think, like I said, it's going to be the run game that's on display. And Elk City is coming off a pretty good upset victory over Cushing. It was a really close game, too, if I remember right. 21-14. And then Clinton and Bristow. I think, I can tell you right now, I think both offenses are going to be on full display in this one. Both teams have a good defense, but I think it's probably going to be all offense in this game. Because Clinton has some speed, and so does Bristow. And they are both coming off good wins. I know nobody had expected Bristow to go to Broken Bow and pull off the victory, and it was like 55-6. So Bristow is playing on a pretty good hot streak right now, but yeah, I think it's going to be an offensive showdown in that game. Getting to 5A, I referenced Noble and McAllister. Coweta and Carl Albert, I think that's going to be like the second biggest game in the bracket. While Carl Albert has not taken a 5A loss in, I don't remember how long, but it's been a while since Carl Albert took a loss to a 5A school, but I think Coweta is going to give them everything they want. I think it's probably going to come down to defense in the second half, but first half it's probably going to be very back and forth. And then moving on to 6A 1 and 2. 6A 1, I got Jenks and Mustang, and then 6A 2, I got Sand Springs and Deer Creek. Mustang, I think, officially threw their hat in the conversation when they beat Owasso. Unfortunately, they are going to be without one of their wide receivers, because I believe he got injured in the first round, but they got probably one of the best quarterbacks out there, and I forget the kid's name if I can go back and look. But they're coming off a pretty good win over Edmond Santa Fe. So yeah, they got Tristan Russell at quarterback, and he can throw and run. And then in the receiving game, they got Cameron Broadus. And then, man, I can't remember that tight end's name. I just know he's an Oregon commit. He's really big and physical and fast. They did have Keegan Bass, but he's out for the year from what I've been told. But other than that, I think Mustang is, I tell you right now, they're my pick to make it to the 6A1 title game now, because, like I said, after they beat Owasso and after they beat Edmond Santa Fe, I think the Broncos officially put their hat into the title conversation. Of course, Jenks is no fluke at all. And I think, I forget, but this is like their, I think it's like their 8th straight semifinal appearance. Quote me if I'm wrong, but they've got quite a few semifinal appearances. But I think But then as far as 6A2, Sand Springs and Deer Creek. This is going to be an interesting matchup to say the least, because I know Deer Creek pulls the biggest upset of the year against Choctaw. And then if I remember, Sand Springs beat Del City last week. I don't really know much on either team, but from what I've seen on Deer Creek, a lot of their losses were to, like, really good teams, and this is why I said they were going to be a scary team going into the playoffs, because they had some really close losses to some good teams, and they had a couple really good wins as well. And then and then I have another 6A2 pick, which is Bixby and Stillwater, but honestly, this year, really hard to pick against Bixby, especially as explosive as that offense is. You got multiple D1 receivers out there, and just, yeah, honestly, Bixby definitely wins it this year, and I'm already saying it, and everyone else has agreed. I think everyone else is pretty much playing for second. This is what they were saying on the Squirrel Pick'em show last week. But, yeah, it's, that offense is good. But, I do think, but like I said, this matchup against Stillwater, that is, a rematch of Week 3, if I remember right. I think that game is being played at Langston University. Sounds about right. Anyway, I think that's going to about do it for this episode. Do not forget to leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions or comments, definitely tweet them to me at theCoolDude52. I will catch you guys in the next one.